For 13 years and 4 months, I was his wife. In all, that was nearly 5,000 days and nights of fulfilling my duty as a devoted daughter-in-law, a wife who took care of her family, and a mother who loved her children with all her heart. Tiffany, my best friend, used to tell me that if there was one woman in this world who least deserved to be betrayed, it was me. And yet, one day, I found out that my husband was having an affair. He was cheating on me with the woman who had abandoned him more than 13 years earlier and had now come back. He left me and our 2 young children for one reason only, because I was an ugly wife. That year, my family moved to a coastal resettlement neighborhood in Berkeley, Norfolk. It was a small community where most people had come from different places to build a new life. We were given a small lot at the end of the street. Next door stood a modest 1-story house where Kyrie lived. I had just turned 12, and that was the first time I met Jackson. He was a year older than me and attended the same public school where I was about to enroll. From my mother, I learned that Jackson's father had once been a successful man. After marrying Kyrie, he repeatedly cheated on her. She endured it for years before finally leaving him when Jackson was 8. Mother and son moved from place to place trying to make a living until they finally settled in this neighborhood. Since we were close in age, Jackson and I quickly became friends. I noticed that whenever he went outside to play, some of the neighborhood kids would make fun of him for growing up without a father. Sometimes I caught him looking at my family with quiet envy. One day, I asked him what his dream was. "To have a happy family of my own," he answered. To my 12-year-old self, he seemed like the loneliest boy in the world. From then on, I always stood up for him whenever the other children picked on him. If I had anything good to eat, I would always bring some over to share with him. We stayed together through middle school and high school. Over the years, I changed from the little girl who used to grab Jackson's hand and drag him outside to play into the younger girl who quietly followed behind him wherever he went. By the time I was 15, I knew I had fallen in love with the boy next door. As he grew older, Jackson became more and more handsome. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and always made people feel safe standing beside him. His thick eyebrows only made his bright eyes stand out even more. He was smart and always ranked first in school. Handsome and brilliant, he was never short of pretty girls who wanted to be around him. Little by little, he stopped noticing the plain girl who lived next door. I was shy and slower to mature than the other girls my age. I had never been pretty. I was short, and years of helping my parents work outside had left my skin dark from the sun. People always said that a woman needed both beauty and a good figure. I had neither. I wasn't outstanding at school, either. Standing next to Jackson, I felt like a toad beside a prince. The only thing I had going for me was that I was kind and hardworking, so everyone in the neighborhood cared about me. When I was a senior in high school, Jackson was accepted into one of the top universities in Norfolk. He had taken his first step toward a bright future. I was beginning my final year of high school and quietly looked for a college near his university so I could stay close to him. Jackson came home about once a month. Every time I heard he was back, I would get ready early and hurry next door to see Kyrie. The first few times, he happily told me stories about life in the city. I listened with excitement as he talked about the streets, the restaurants, and everything he had seen. But little by little, he came home less often. He started dressing better. Whenever he came back, he stayed in his room looking at his phone. Even when Kyrie called out to tell him I was there, he no longer wanted to come outside. Then the thing I had feared the most finally happened. Jackson had a girlfriend. I heard Kyrie tell my mother that Jackson had a girlfriend. It seemed they had been dating for a while. I was 18 when I learned what heartbreak felt like. I couldn't eat or go to school for 2 days, and my mother was worried sick about me. On the 3rd day, I finally pulled myself together and went back to school. I kept telling myself that Jackson still had more than 3 years of college left. In less than a year, I would be studying near him. I still had a chance. But before I could turn that hope into reality, another tragedy struck. My parents were killed in a workplace accident. It felt like a bolt of lightning had torn my world apart. Overnight, the happy family of 3 that I had known was gone, and I was left completely alone. During those days, all I did was cry. I had no appetite and no strength to do anything. Thankfully, Kyrie stayed by my side and took care of me. Jackson didn't come home until a month after my parents passed away. He came to pay his respects. After spending 6 months away at college, he finally noticed me again. He placed a hand on my shoulder and said a few words to comfort me. I couldn't hold back anymore. I threw myself into his arms and cried. Jackson didn't say anything. He simply stroked my hair and let me cry. It was the first time he had ever held me. I received a $100,000 settlement after my parents died. At the time, it was enough to cover my entire college education. But every time I looked at that money, I thought of the lives it had come from. I couldn't bring myself to spend a single dollar. I left it untouched in a savings account. But the worst was not over. 3 months later, Kyrie suffered a stroke and was left bedridden. The neighbors and I rushed her to the hospital. The next day, while I was wiping her down, Jackson came back. As soon as he heard the news, he caught the earliest bus home. He rushed into the hospital room with his backpack still on his shoulders. His eyes were filled with tears. "Mom!" He cried like a little boy. I stepped over and held him. It was the first time I had ever held Jackson. The two of us, forced to grow up too soon, leaned on each other in that small hospital room. 5 days later, Kyrie finally woke up. Jackson and I took turns caring for her, although I stayed with her most of the time because he still had to finish his final exams. Her condition improved, but the doctor said she would never be able to work again. One day, while I was bringing her some porridge, I accidentally overheard a conversation between her and Jackson. I wasn't trying to listen. It just happened because they were talking about me. In a weak voice, Kyrie said, "Jackson, I'm afraid I don't have much time left. My biggest wish is to see you get married." Jackson quickly shook his head. "Mom, don't say that. You're going to live a long life." "I know my own condition," she replied. "If something happens to me, I want someone to take care of you." Jackson lowered his head. "I'm still in college. Besides, who would marry me with our family like this?" Kyrie answered without hesitation. "McKenna would. She's kind, hardworking, and knows how to care for people." Jackson immediately interrupted her. "Mom, what are you talking about? I've only ever thought of McKenna as my little sister. I've never had those feelings for her." My heart skipped a beat. Tears filled my eyes. I gripped the hot food container so tightly that my hands hurt. It felt as if something was crushing my chest. So Jackson had never looked at me as anything more than a younger sister. Carrie continued, "Listen to me first. McKenna may not be beautiful, but she has a good heart. She'll make a wonderful wife. I even asked Pastor Williams about her. He said she had a kind heart and strong faith. Her parents are gone now, and she has no one left. If you marry her, the two of you can build a life together. She won't look down on our family." Jackson lowered his voice. "Mom, I already have a girlfriend." I couldn't hear Kyrie's reaction. The room fell silent. I covered my mouth to keep myself from crying out. The tears had already run down my face. Even though I had heard before that Jackson was seeing someone, hearing him admit it himself felt completely different. It hurt so much I could hardly breathe. Carrie wasn't someone who forced her own wishes on others. After a long silence, she asked, "Who is she?" "Her name is Camaria. She's my classmate at college. We've been together for almost a year." "Then bring her home for me to meet. If she's a kind girl, you two can get married." Jackson sighed. "Mom, she's still in college. We can't just get married. Besides, with our family in this situation, it wouldn't be fair to her." Kyrie looked at him quietly. "Why wouldn't it be fair? You can get a marriage license first and keep going to school. I just want to know you'll have someone beside you before I leave this world." Jackson walked out of the room with a heavy sigh. The hallway was empty. Only the food container, still warm, sat outside the door. I kept going to school, then cooking and bringing meals to Kyrie at the hospital every day. I acted as if I had never overheard that conversation and treated her exactly the same as before. Whenever I visited, she would hold my hand and sigh with regret. Some nights, when I felt lonely at home, I brought my books to the hospital so I could study while keeping her company. The doctors and nurses often thought I was Kyrie's daughter. Others assumed I was her daughter-in-law. Kyrie would smile and say, "She's not my daughter-in-law. She's my daughter. Well, if she's not my daughter, then she'll be my daughter-in-law. Either way, she's my child." Every time I heard that, I simply lowered my head and smiled. But inside, all I felt was bitterness. If I ever had the chance, I would gladly become her daughter-in-law. But Jackson had already told her himself that he only saw me as a little sister. By June, Carrie's condition had gotten worse again. Some days, she was awake only for a short time before falling asleep again. Nearly all the family's money had been spent on her treatment. Jackson had no choice but to work through the summer. Every time he came to the hospital, he looked thinner. His eyes were bloodshot, as though he hadn't slept for days. He always came in a hurry and left just as quickly. Sometimes he only had time to look at Kyari before pressing a handful of cash into my hand. "Makena, I know you're about to graduate, but I have to ask you to look after Mom for me. I owe you more than I can ever repay." I looked at the man I loved growing more exhausted every day. Even though he didn't love me, I couldn't stop loving him. I knew that if I refused, he would only feel worse, so I accepted the money and straightened each bill before putting it away. "Don't worry, I'll take good care of her. I don't have my parents anymore. I've already come to think of her as my own mother." Jackson looked at me with grateful eyes before leaving. I couldn't help wishing that one day, the gratitude in his eyes would become love. At the end of June, I graduated from high school and applied to Tidewater Community College, not far from Old Dominion University. Kyrie's condition continued to decline. Sometimes one side of her body would become completely stiff, and I would gently massage her hands and feet while talking to her about Jackson. How talented he was, how hard he worked, and how she had to get better so she could see him succeed. A month later, on the day I received my college acceptance letter, Jackson suddenly proposed to me. I froze for a brief second in the hospital room. I was carrying a container of porridge when I walked in and saw him standing beside Kyrie's bed. He turned toward me without a word, dropped to one knee, and opened a small box. Inside was a simple silver ring. It had cost less than $50, but to me, it was more precious than the most expensive diamond in the world. Everyone in the room cheered. Kyrie lay in the hospital bed with tears of happiness running down her face. My mind went blank. I could hardly hear what Jackson was saying. It wasn't until he gently took my hand and slipped the ring onto my finger that I realized I was about to marry the man I had known for 6 years and secretly loved for the past 3. I had just lost both of my parents, and more than anything, I wanted a family again. Since neither Jackson nor I had any relatives in Norfolk, and Kyrie was still seriously ill, our wedding was nothing more than a marriage license at the county clerk's office followed by a small meal with a few neighbors. Kyrie asked the community association president to help arrange everything, so the ceremony went smoothly. Just like that, I became Jackson's wife and Kyrie's daughter-in-law. That evening, I went back to the hospital with Jackson to see Kyrie. Maybe seeing her wish come true gave her new strength, because she looked healthier than she had in weeks. "No more calling me Miss Kyrie," she said with a smile. "From now on, call me Mom." I lowered my head shyly. "Yes, Mom." Her smile grew even brighter. After we stayed for a while, she urged us to go home early. She even gave Jackson a knowing look, hoping we would start our life together as husband and wife. But we had known each other for so many years that becoming husband and wife overnight felt strange for both of us. We went home, took our showers, had dinner, and slept side by side. Not long afterward, Jackson returned to Norfolk to begin his second year at Old Dominion University, while I still had another month before reporting to Tidewater Community College. I continued visiting the hospital every day to care for Kyrie. The other patients often praised her for having such a thoughtful young daughter-in-law. Whenever she heard that, Kyrie looked happier than anyone else. At least now, she believed that if anything happened to her, Jackson would not have to face life alone. Whether it was because the pastor had been right or simply because she had finally found peace, Kyrie's health slowly improved after Jackson and I got married. She began eating better, smiling more, and on good days, she could even walk slowly through the hallway with my support. After nearly a month, she was finally discharged from the hospital. The happiest person was Jackson. He let out a long breath of relief and, for the first time, reached over and held my hand. "Thank you." Just those 2 words were enough to fill me with happiness. Life, however, was never that simple. As happy as we were that Kyrie was getting better, we still had to face reality. Every dollar we had was gone after months of paying for her treatment. The money Kyrie had saved for Jackson's education was gone as well. Even if Jackson kept working, he still couldn't afford the remaining 3 years of college. Kyrie could no longer work, and I had just turned 18. If I went to college, it would mean another expense. Besides, Kyrie had only just returned home and couldn't stay by herself. I couldn't stop worrying. 3 days before I was supposed to report to Tidewater Community College, I went to Norfolk to see Jackson so we could talk about what to do. When I arrived at his apartment, I was told he was at work. I asked for the address and went there. It was a large construction site. Even though summer was almost over, the afternoon sun was still blazing. Dust from cement and bricks filled the air. I saw my husband sitting alone in a corner, eating a plain sandwich. His hair was covered with cement dust. His handsome face had grown darker from working outside. His clothes were old and soaked with sweat. Seeing him like that hurt me more than I could put into words. To me, Jackson had always been someone who belonged in a white shirt, standing in an office, a classroom, or anywhere his talent could shine. He was too gifted to spend his days doing backbreaking labor at a construction site. I didn't walk over to him. He had never told me what kind of work he was doing. Maybe he wanted to hold on to the last of his pride. I couldn't take that away from him. I quietly stepped behind a nearby tree and let myself cry. That was the moment I made the biggest decision of my life. The day before I was supposed to start college, Jackson came home. After dinner, I asked him to come outside with me. The moonlight covered the yard as I looked at him and said, "I've decided not to go to college." Jackson looked at me in shock. "What? I know you and Mom want me to keep studying, but Mom can't stay home alone, and if both of us go to college, we won't have enough money. I still have the $100,000 from my parents' settlement." Jackson grabbed my hand. "No. You can't do that. I'll work." "Jackson, you have to finish college." I looked straight at him. "I'm not a good student. Even if I go to college, it won't make much difference. But you're different. You have the ability to succeed. I want to use that money so you can finish school. I'll stay here, work, and take care of Mom." Jackson shook his head. "I can't let you do this. I'll owe you for the rest of my life." I smiled. "I'm your wife. Think of it as a loan. One day you'll pay Mom and me back by giving us a better life." Jackson pulled me into his arms. "Thank you, Makena. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." Then, for the first time, he kissed me. It was a gentle kiss beneath the moonlight. Years later, he failed to keep that promise. But I still believe that, at that moment, he meant every word he said. When Kyrie learned what I had decided, she held me and cried for a long time. More than anyone, she knew it was the only choice we had. Standing in front of Jackson and me, she said firmly, "If Jackson ever hurts you, even a little, I'll break both his legs myself." From then on, I stayed in Norfolk and learned the seafood business from the women in the neighborhood. Tiffany became my business partner. After trying different products, I found that selling fresh seafood suited me best. I started waking up before dawn every morning to work. I transferred the entire $100,000 to Jackson so he could finish college. Whenever I managed to save a little extra, I sent him money and food so he wouldn't have to worry about anything except studying. Jackson stopped working at the construction site and devoted himself completely to school. Before long, he became the confident, handsome college student he had once been. That Christmas was my first one as Jackson's wife. Since I had started selling seafood, our finances had become more stable. For the first time in a long while, our home felt warm, peaceful, and full of hope. Almost every time Jackson lay down, he fell asleep right away after the long drive home. But that night was different. Maybe it was the wine. Instead of making us sleepy, it left both of us wide awake. I felt my heart beating a little faster. Then I felt Jackson's hand lightly brush against mine. I shyly turned to look at him. Our eyes met. He slowly moved closer and gently kissed my eyelids. I closed my eyes and waited for his touch. Beneath the dim darkness of New Year's Eve, after more than 6 months of marriage, we finally became husband and wife in every sense of the word. Time flew by. After 4 years of college, Jackson didn't let Kyrie or me down. He graduated with honors and was hired immediately by a well-known real estate company. Thanks to his ability and his polished appearance, he quickly became the company's top-performing employee. One promotion followed another. He became a supervisor, then a department manager, and finally a director in just 3 years. By then, our first son, Barack, had already turned 1-year-old. The day Jackson became a director was also the day he decided to buy a small house in East Beach and bring Kyrie, Barack, and me to live with him. Everyone back in our old neighborhood said that all those years of hardship had finally paid off for me. I had spent years taking care of my mother-in-law, supporting my husband through college, carrying and giving birth to our son, and now I was finally enjoying the life I had worked so hard for. The day Jackson led me into our bedroom, he wrapped his arms around me from behind and gently rubbed my belly, still soft after having our son. "I've been waiting for this day," he said quietly. "The day I could finally give you and our son a comfortable life." I smiled with all my heart. Everything I had sacrificed had been worth it. Not because we finally had money, but because I had become Jackson's wife and the mother of his children. 4 years earlier, I wouldn't have dared to dream that my life would turn out this way. Jackson wanted me to stay home to take care of Kyrie and Barack while he worked and provided for the family. But after spending so many years working, I couldn't get used to staying home doing nothing. Kyrie had recovered enough to help look after Barack, so I found a seafood supplier and started selling seafood at markets around Norfolk to earn a little extra income. Jackson tried to convince me not to do it, but when he saw I had made up my mind, he let me do what I wanted. Around that time, Tiffany also moved to Norfolk and opened her own spa, so I finally had someone to talk to once in a while. 5 years later, I became pregnant with our second child. This time, we were expecting a little girl. I had a beautiful home, a mother-in-law who loved me like her own daughter, a handsome husband with a successful career, and 2 children, a son and a daughter. My life felt complete. After all those years together, our family was peaceful and happy. Tiffany often told me there was no way Jackson would ever betray me. But no one can ever predict what tomorrow will bring. People say that when you're expecting a girl, you crave sour food. I don't know why, but ever since I got pregnant, all I wanted was sweets. My body had already changed after giving birth to Barack. With this pregnancy, I gained even more weight. My face lost what little beauty it had. One evening, I was sitting in our bedroom waiting for Jackson to come home. One hand rested on the extra weight beneath my chin while the other held a half-eaten piece of cake. Just then, Tiffany called. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Eating cake. At this hour? You're going to end up looking like a truck driver." I laughed. "So what if I do?" At my age, all I care about is having a healthy baby. "When are you due?" "About 2 more weeks. After you have the baby, you'd better start losing weight. Your husband is handsome, successful, and always meeting people. Aren't you worried?" "Why would I be?" "I look like this because I gave birth to his children." Tiffany sighed. "If every man thought the way you do, there wouldn't be so many husbands cheating while their wives are pregnant or recovering after childbirth." I smiled. "Instead of telling me how to keep my husband, maybe you should find yourself one." We laughed and ended the call. The smile on my face slowly faded. I looked at the clock and let out a quiet sigh. For the past few months, Jackson had been coming home later and later. Sometimes he didn't come home at all because of unexpected business trips. A woman's intuition kept telling me something wasn't right, but the trust I had in my husband pushed those thoughts away. I couldn't believe Jackson would ever do anything to betray me. I kept telling myself that he worked so hard to provide for our family. The least I could do was trust him instead of doubting him. The day I went into labor happened to be during one of Jackson's business trips. My water broke early. Only Kyrie, Barack, and I were at home. Kyrie quickly called for a car and took me to the hospital. She kept calling Jackson on the way, but he never answered. The contractions came one after another, leaving me exhausted. The only thing that kept me going was the thought of the little girl I was about to meet. After 8 long hours in the delivery room, Luna was finally born. The moment she came into the world, her cries filled the entire room. Jackson didn't answer his phone until the next morning. After Kyrie told him that I had given birth, he simply said he was happy to hear the news. He didn't ask how I was or how Luna was doing. He only said he was busy and hung up. He told us he would come home soon. 5 days later, he finally came back. 3 days after giving birth, I was discharged from the hospital. That weekend, Jackson came home to see us. He held Luna for a little while, asked me a couple of questions, then took his clothes and went to shower. Maybe it was only my imagination, but I couldn't see the same joy in his eyes that he had when Barack was born. That night, he slept in another room, saying he was afraid he might wake the baby. I couldn't help thinking that it had always been the baby's crying that woke him, not the other way around. By then, I already had my suspicions. I just refused to let myself face them. People often say a wife is always the last person to find out her husband is cheating. Maybe that's because a wife believes in her husband and in her marriage so completely that she can't see what is right in front of her. Luna had trouble keeping her milk down, so every time she finished nursing, I had to hold her upright and gently pat her back for quite a while before putting her to bed. Newborns woke up every 2 or 3 hours to eat, which meant I almost never got a full night's sleep. Even so, Jackson always had his eyes on his phone while Kyrie and I took care of everything around the house. The doubts I had been trying to push away kept growing stronger, wrapping themselves around my mind. One day, I had a stomachache and needed to use the bathroom. Kyrie was giving Barack a bath, so I called out, "Jackson, could you hold Luna for a minute? I just need to run to the bathroom. Just leave her there," he replied without looking up. His eyes stayed fixed on his phone as his fingers kept typing. After giving birth, my emotions were harder to control than usual. Combined with the way he had been acting, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "You've been glued to that phone all day. The past few days you've spent more time with it than with your own daughter." Jackson looked up, clearly annoyed. "What kind of thing is that to say? I took time off work to stay home with you and the baby. What more do you want? Do you know how much money I lose every day I'm not working? If you're going to stay home, then at least help Mom and help me a little. I've been working hard to support this family. Now that I finally have a few days off, I just want to rest. What's wrong with that? But I just gave birth. I'm still recovering, and Mom is already busy helping with the kids." Jackson frowned. "Women give birth every day. Stop using that as an excuse to lose your temper." After saying that, he picked up his phone and walked downstairs. My heart turned cold. At that moment, I knew my husband had changed. A week later, I had to take Luna back to the hospital for her follow-up appointment. I told Jackson about it, but he said he had an important meeting with a client that day. Kyrie had to take Barack to school, so I asked Tiffany to come with me instead. Before we left, the hospital called to say that the clinic was overcrowded and asked if I could switch my appointment to another location farther away. I agreed without giving it much thought and let Tiffany know where to meet us. The weather was hot, but I still wrapped Luna carefully and covered her from the sun before stepping outside. As we walked toward the entrance, something caught my attention. Across the street, in front of an upscale hotel, a white SUV was parked by the curb. I recognized the license plate immediately. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Maybe Jackson really was meeting a client nearby. I reached for my phone, ready to call him. Before I could dial, I saw him walking out of the hotel. Beside him was a young woman in a beautiful red dress. What caught my eye wasn't the dress. It was Jackson's arm around her waist. She had one arm around his waist as well, leaning against him like she belonged there. I stood frozen. I was his wife. I was standing right there. The moment I saw them together, everything inside me collapsed. It felt as if all the trust, all the love, and every dream I had for our family had shattered in an instant. Seeing me stop, Tiffany tugged on my arm. "What are you doing? Come on!" I didn't answer. She followed my gaze and saw the woman in the red dress wrap her arms around Jackson's neck and kiss him. Jackson didn't pull away. Instead, he held her even closer. Tiffany cursed under her breath. "Isn't that your husband? Damn it, that bastard's cheating on you." Only then did I come back to my senses. Tiffany grabbed my arm and pulled me straight toward them. I had only one thought in my mind. Please, let this be a nightmare. My body was still weak from giving birth. Every step pulled at my incision, but I didn't care. Tiffany dragged me across the street while I held my 1-month-old daughter in my arms. Tiffany rushed straight toward the woman and grabbed her by the hair. Caught off guard, she cried out as her head was yanked backward. Jackson was startled. He quickly pulled her into his arms to protect her. "Hey, what's going on?" Then he looked up and saw me. The color drained from his face. "Makena, why are you here?" I looked at my husband holding another woman in his arms. My heart felt as though it were being torn apart. Every beat brought a new wave of pain. People passing by began stopping to watch. More and more gathered around us. Some even took out their phones and started recording. Jackson hurriedly raised a hand to shield the woman's face and said, "We'll talk at home. Please take the baby and go home first." His words and his actions left me unable to breathe. I couldn't say a single word. Tiffany stepped in front of me. "Why should she go home? You're the one who should be ashamed. If you knew shame, you never would have done something this disgusting in the first place. Your wife gave birth just 1 month ago, and you're already running around with another woman. You even have the nerve to ask her to protect your reputation?" Then she pointed at the woman beside Jackson. "And you! Did you know he has a wife and children? How could you get involved with a married man?" As soon as Tiffany said that, people around us began whispering. Jackson snapped, "Tiffany, stay out of my family's business!" Tiffany shot back without hesitation. "Makana may be quiet, but I'm not. Today I'm going to make sure the two of you know she isn't someone you can bully." Jackson tried to pull the woman toward his SUV, but Tiffany refused to let them leave. The three of them struggled right there in front of the hotel. Luna started crying in my arms, making the scene even more chaotic. Her cries finally pulled me back to reality. Tears were already running down my face. I shouted, "That's enough! Stop it!" My shout made all three of them stop. Tiffany let go of the other woman. Jackson straightened his clothes and looked at me. I finally found my voice. "What is this, Jackson?" Before he could answer, the woman in the red dress spoke first. "You're Makina, aren't you?" she asked calmly. "I'm Kamaria. Jackson already told me everything. We were in love years ago, but I had to leave the country because of family reasons. He only married you to repay you for taking care of his mother. Now we've found each other again, and our feelings have never changed. He never loved you. The two of you were never going to be happy together. He was waiting until after you gave birth to tell you the truth. Since we're meeting like this today, I might as well say it now. I hope you'll give us your blessing." Hearing her say those words felt like listening to someone else's love story, except somehow I had become the villain who had come between two people who belonged together. What hurt even more was that my husband didn't deny a single word she said. Tiffany couldn't hold back anymore. "You've got some nerve. Where was all this great love of yours when Jackson had no money for school and barely had enough to eat? Why didn't you come back then?" My friend spent more than 13 years standing by him, helping him through school and giving birth to his children. Now that he's successful, you show up talking about true love and expect her to step aside? That's not how this works. I reached over and stopped Tiffany. Then I looked straight at Jackson. If everything she just said is true, what are you going to do? Are you really going to leave me and our children for your first love? Jackson lowered his head. After a long silence, he finally said, "I'm sorry." The last bit of hope I had left disappeared with those two words. While I was struggling through morning sickness carrying his child, he had been meeting his old girlfriend. While I was carrying his baby, he had been sending her sweet messages. While I was fighting through 8 hours of labor, he might have been holding another woman in his arms. What gave her the right to ask me to step aside? I handed Luna to Tiffany and shouted, "You two are disgusting!" Then I threw myself at them. I slapped Jackson and Kamaria over and over again. Jackson never fought back. He only tried to shield Kamaria. That made me even angrier. I hit them with everything I had. My body was still weak from giving birth just a month earlier, and the shock was more than I could bear. I didn't know how long I kept hitting them. I only stopped when Luna's loud crying reached my ears. I stumbled back to my daughter, picked her up, and held her while trying to calm her down. Jackson never once asked how Luna or I were. Tiffany was the only one who stayed beside us, opening an umbrella to shield us from the sun. Jackson hurried Kamaria into his SUV and drove away, leaving us behind in front of everyone. My legs nearly gave out. Tiffany caught me before I fell and helped Luna and me back home. When Kayari saw me walk in with my hair in a mess and my face completely drained of color, she rushed over in panic. My goodness, what happened? The moment she asked, I couldn't hold back anymore. Tears poured down my face. "Mom, let me take Luna upstairs first." Luna had already fallen asleep in my arms. Looking at her peaceful little face, I suddenly felt grateful that she was still too young to understand what had happened to her family. When I came back downstairs, Tiffany was quietly telling Kyrie everything that had happened. The look on Kyrie's face shifted from shock to anger. As soon as she saw me, she hurried over and held me. My child. Hearing those words, I broke down in her arms. Ever since I married Jackson, Kyrie had never treated me like a daughter-in-law. She had always treated me like her own daughter. Now we were both crying because of the same man. "Don't worry," she said. "I'll call him home and teach him a lesson. If he dares fool around outside, I'll disown him." But before Kyrie could call him, Jackson came home on his own. He wasn't alone. Camaria walked in beside him. The moment I saw her, I wanted to throw her out of my house. I took a step forward, but Kyrie caught my arm. "Makena, calm down. Jackson, and you too. Since you're here, then let's settle this properly." Jackson and Camaria sat down together on one side of the living room. Tiffany helped me sit beside Kyrie on the other side. As I lowered myself onto the couch, my eyes fell on their hands. They were tightly clasped together. I looked down at my own hands. They had become rough from years of selling seafood. Also, Jackson could spend his days holding a pen instead of doing hard labor. Now those same hands were holding another woman's soft, delicate fingers. The room felt colder than ever. Kyrie was the first to speak. "Jackson, explain what's going on." Jackson took a deep breath. "Mom, do you remember when I told you I already had a girlfriend back then? That woman was Camaria. Years ago, I thought she had abandoned me. But the truth is, there was a misunderstanding. Her family had an emergency, and she had to leave the country. All these years, she never loved anyone else. She was waiting for me. I never forgot her either." Before Kyrie could respond, Camaria spoke up. "Ma'am, please listen to me. Jackson and I truly love each other. We lost each other because of a misunderstanding. He can't be happy living with someone he doesn't love. Please, let us be together." Tears filled her eyes as she spoke. She looked completely different from the woman who had challenged me outside the hotel. Kyrie let out a cold laugh. "Feel sorry for her? Then who feels sorry for my daughter-in-law? Who feels sorry for my grandchildren? If you truly loved my son, you wouldn't have left him when he had nothing. If you truly loved him, then after finding out he had a wife and children, you should have walked away and wished him well. Instead, you came back, got involved with a married man, and turned him into someone who betrayed his own family. Is that what you call love?" Jackson immediately spoke up for Camaria. "Mom, I already told you it was all a misunderstanding. From the beginning until now, Camaria is the only woman I've ever loved. Only when I'm with her do I feel truly happy." Tiffany couldn't take it anymore. She shot to her feet and pointed straight at Jackson. "You bastard! If you've loved her all this time, then why did you marry Makina? Why did you let her work herself to the bone to put you through college? Why did you let her have 2 children with you? Are you saying none of those 13 years meant anything? She cooked for you, took care of you, raised your children, and made sure you never had to worry about anything except work. Wasn't that happiness?" Jackson looked embarrassed. "This is my family's business. Stay out of it. What I feel for Makina is gratitude. I've always been grateful to her. I've worked hard to give her a good life. The money I've earned for this family is many times more than what she spent on me back then." His words cut straight through me. I looked at him and asked the question that had been haunting me. "So, you never loved me? You married me because Camaria was gone and you wanted to make your mother happy?" Jackson couldn't meet my eyes. Before he could answer, Camaria spoke again. "Years ago, Jackson brought that ring to propose to me. I was too young to accept it, and not long after that, my family had to leave the country. We lost contact. That's why—" "Be quiet!" I shouted. "I want to hear my husband answer me." My voice was already breaking. Jackson lowered his head. "I'm sorry." I stared at him. "So that ring? You bought it for her?" He closed his eyes for a moment before answering. "Yes." My whole body went numb. "All these years? I was only her replacement?" Jackson whispered. "I'm sorry." I felt all the strength leave my body. I collapsed onto the couch, gasping for air. My throat tightened until I could barely breathe. Kyrie and Tiffany hurried over, rubbing my back and trying to calm me down. "Makena, take it easy," Kyrie said. Then she turned to Jackson. "Listen carefully. Makena is the only daughter-in-law I'll ever accept. No one else will ever take her place in this family. And you," she pointed at him with a trembling finger. "Take a good look at yourself. Makena worked herself to the bone to put you through school. Now that you've made something of yourself, you're ready to throw her away? I raised you better than this. If you leave McKenna, then don't ever call me your mother again." Jackson looked at Kyrie in disbelief. "Mom, I'm your son. How can you do this to me? Your father betrayed me. I know exactly what that kind of pain feels like. I will never stand by and watch my son do the same thing to his wife." Jackson took a deep breath before saying, "I'll give McKenna everything. I'll leave her the house. I'll split my assets with her. Isn't that enough?" I slowly raised my hand and pointed toward the front door. "Get out!" Jackson looked at me. I repeated myself, louder this time. "Get out, both of you." There was nothing else he could say. He took Camaria's hand and walked out. The front door closed behind them. I sat there without moving. When I was 18, my only dream was to marry the man I loved. Back then, Jackson had nothing. I never asked him to make me rich. I only wanted him to finish school, find a stable job, and build a peaceful family with me. I believed that after all those years of sacrifice, my dream had finally come true. But Jackson had crushed it with his own hands. Every word he spoke felt like another cut across my heart. That night, after I had fed Luna and put her to sleep, I suddenly saw Jackson standing in our bedroom. He was still wearing the same suit he had on that morning. I stood there in wrinkled clothes. There was a dried milk stain across my chest. My hair was a mess, and my eyes were swollen from crying all day. I held the burp cloth stained with Luna's spit up and looked at him without saying a word. Jackson took my hand and led me out to the balcony, trying not to wake Luna. He spoke first. "You already know everything that happened today. I'm truly sorry. I know you've sacrificed so much for me and for this family, but no one can control their feelings. After seeing Camaria again, I realized I never stopped loving her. Please, let each other go. I'll make sure you and the children are taken care of." I looked at him. "Taken care of? You think your money can make up for everything? You can repay the $100,000 I gave you back then. But how are you going to repay my youth, my happiness? More than 13 years of my life? You knew how much I loved you. How could you lie to me like this? Tell me, what does she have that I don't?" Jackson frowned. "Stop calling her names. She's a decent woman." I laughed bitterly. "A decent woman doesn't steal another woman's husband." His face darkened. "Enough. Look at yourself. You've let yourself go. You're overweight, your skin is rough, and you always smell like seafood. Standing beside you only embarrasses me. Camaria is gentle, beautiful, and takes care of herself. How could you even compare yourself to her?" Every word felt like another knife. I remembered the company dinner a few years earlier when I overheard his female coworkers laughing about me in the restroom. They mocked my weight, my appearance, my education, and even the smell of seafood on my clothes. After that night, Jackson never brought me to another company event again. He even told me to stop selling seafood. I had quit after becoming pregnant with Luna. I finally understood. It wasn't only because of the pregnancy. He had been ashamed of me for a long time. I looked at the man standing in front of me. He no longer looked like the boy I had loved since I was 15. "So you've already decided to divorce me?" I asked. "Yes," he answered. "Let's end this. It'll be better for both of us." I shook my head. "No, I won't divorce you." Jackson stared at me. "You're being selfish." Just then, Kyrie rushed upstairs after hearing us arguing. "You ungrateful boy!" she shouted. "How could you say those things to your wife? She's like this because of this family." "If it weren't for McKenna." "Mom, stop bringing up the past," Jackson interrupted. "I'll pay everything back. Double it, triple it. I'll even leave this house to her. Isn't that enough?" Hearing that, Kyrie grabbed a broom nearby and started hitting him. Jackson dodged every swing before running downstairs to get away. I stood alone on the third-floor balcony. My eyes fell on my reflection in the glass. I saw an overweight body, stretch marks covering my stomach, a pale face, and swollen eyes that had cried until there were no tears left. Jackson's words echoed over and over in my head. Looking at myself, every bit of confidence I had disappeared. I felt like someone who had been abandoned in the middle of nowhere. I watched Jackson hurry into his SUV and drive away. In a single day, he had driven away from me 3 times. I had just given birth. I had been hit with the biggest shock of my life. All I could see was my heavy body, my messy hair, my lack of education, and the fact that my husband no longer wanted me. From the time I was 15 until I turned 29, I had loved the wrong man. I looked over the edge of the balcony. It was 3 stories down. If I jumped, everything would be over. A voice seemed to whisper inside my head. Jump. If you jump, you won't have to suffer anymore. I used to look down on women who ended their lives because of love. I never imagined I would have the same thought one day. But then I asked myself another question. If I died, what would happen? Would Jackson feel guilty? The answer came almost immediately. No. He would probably marry Camaria, let Kayari raise Barack and Luna, and go on living the life he wanted. The only people my death would truly hurt were my children and Kayari. I couldn't do that to them. I turned around. Kayari was standing there, holding Luna in her arms. Her face was covered with tears. Later, she told me she had been terrified that I was going to jump. I walked toward her and held Luna close. I won't do it, I whispered. I have to stay alive. I have to raise my children, and I have to live long enough to see the man who betrayed us face the consequences. Jackson didn't come home for the next 2 weeks. Whenever he stopped by to pick up a few things, he treated us like strangers. During that time, I slipped into postpartum depression. I cried from morning until night. Sometimes I cried even more than Luna did. My eyes stayed swollen every single day. If Kayari hadn't been there to take care of me and the children, I don't know how I would have survived. One day, she held me while we both cried. This is my fault. If I hadn't asked Jackson to marry you back then, maybe you wouldn't be suffering like this. I shook my head. None of this is your fault, Mom. She had given me a family when I had no one left in the world. Neither of us had ever imagined that one day Jackson would abandon us for another woman. That night, Tiffany called me. The first thing she said was, "So, are your horns still standing after getting cheated on like that?" I couldn't help giving a bitter smile. That's just how Tiffany was. Then she became serious. You need to stop thinking about him. If he's already thrown your marriage away, then you need to think about yourself. Figure out how to get custody of the kids and the biggest share of the assets. I stayed quiet for a long time before answering. Money isn't what I wanted. All I ever wanted was a husband who loved his wife, loved his children, and cared about his family. But Jackson can never give me that anymore. After thinking it over for an entire month, I was the one who finally called Jackson. Let's get a divorce. Getting married was easy. Getting divorced was much more complicated because of all the legal procedures. Since both of us agreed to the divorce, the process moved much faster. The law clearly spelled out how property should be divided after a divorce. But after meeting many women who had gone through the same thing I had, I finally understood why so many women today no longer wanted to get married. Traditional thinking has always expected women to be the ones who keep the family together and devote themselves completely to their homes. Both husband and wife go out to work and earn money, yet taking care of the children, cooking, and cleaning are still automatically seen as the wife's responsibility. A man who simply comes home on time after work, doesn't spend every night drinking, and doesn't cheat is already praised as a wonderful husband. Meanwhile, a wife is expected to do the housework, carry and raise the children, spend most of her time caring for the family, and then rush off to earn money as well. If she stays home to raise the children, she's called a freeloader. If she's too focused on her career, people say she isn't devoted to her family. That's why so many women lose their health and their beauty after getting married. As society changes, old values and moral boundaries no longer carry the same weight they once did. More and more men betray their wives and look for someone else. It's no surprise that the divorce rate keeps rising. I wasn't beautiful, and I didn't have a successful career. Standing next to a man with Jackson's social status, people only saw a woman who didn't belong beside him. No one saw everything I had sacrificed to help him get there. Maybe Jackson saw it that way too. Maybe that was why he grew tired of me and chose the woman he believed truly matched him, his first love. At that time, my life tasted nothing but bitterness. Encouraged by Camaria, Jackson used his money and his connections to speed up the divorce proceedings. My only request was simple. Luna would stay with me. As for Barack, if Jackson had chosen to abandon this family, then he had no right to ask for custody of our son. Kayari also insisted on staying with me and the children. Jackson agreed to compensate me by giving me the house and a sum of money. Everything was settled quickly. All that remained was the final court hearing. The day of the final hearing was bright and sunny. On the way to the courthouse, I happened to pass a couple taking their wedding photos. I couldn't help thinking back. 13 years earlier, Jackson and I had nothing more than a marriage certificate. We never had a wedding. There was no ceremony, no celebration, not even a single wedding photograph. Only then did I realize how much I had missed out on. My eyes began to sting, but I refused to cry. I forced myself to stop thinking about it. I didn't let Kyrie come with me that day. She had already been deeply disappointed in her son. In just 1 month, she seemed to have aged 10 years. Her health had started getting worse again. I was afraid that if she saw her son's family fall apart with her own eyes, she wouldn't be able to bear it. At 10 o'clock that morning, sunlight filtered through the trees outside the city courthouse. As soon as I got out of the car, I saw Jackson opening the passenger door for Camaria. She was wearing another red dress. From that day on, red became the color I hated most. Tiffany walked up behind me and took my hand. "Let's go." "Are you angry?" she asked. "I'm angry," I answered. "I'm so angry." Even though I tried my best, the tears still fell. Feelings built over so many years couldn't disappear overnight. During the hardest days after giving birth, when I needed my husband's shoulder more than ever, he had been spending time with another woman. And now, on the day we were about to divorce, he didn't seem to feel the slightest regret. I could almost picture the two of them opening an expensive bottle of wine to celebrate after the hearing was over. Tiffany wrapped her arms around me. "Don't worry, they'll get what they deserve. Maybe not today, but one day they will. There's no way people like that can stay happy forever." The hearing ended quickly. As we had agreed, Barack and Luna would both stay with me. The only dispute was over the property. It seemed Camaria had convinced Jackson not to give me as much as he had originally promised. Jackson's attorney questioned me about my income and our marital assets. The house, the car, and every bank account were all in Jackson's name. Everything had been purchased with his reported income. I had no way to argue. The $100,000 I had given him for college had been nothing more than an act of trust. There had never been a loan agreement. I had spent years selling seafood in local markets. None of that income had ever been formally documented, and every dollar I earned had gone straight into supporting our family. How could I prove to the court everything I had done over the past 13 years? Without documents or evidence, I was nothing more than a wife who stayed home and raised the children. In the end, the judge ordered Jackson to pay monthly child support and awarded me only a small share of the marital property. I didn't object. Just like that, my marriage came to an end. Jackson and I walked away from the courthouse in two completely different directions. After the hearing, he came over to me. He said he would still give me some additional money, just not half of everything he owned as he had originally promised. I looked at him and said, "I only want the $100,000 I gave you back then. I don't want anything else from you." No matter what happened, I wanted to keep the last bit of my dignity. Even if I had lost my husband to another woman, I wanted to leave with my head held high. A debt of money is easy to repay. A debt of love never is. I wanted Jackson to remember what I had done for him for the rest of his life. Even though I knew he probably never would, telling myself that was the only way I could make peace with everything. Keeping a marriage alive can be even harder than finding water in the middle of a desert. As the years go by, love slowly fades. The passion that once felt so overwhelming is gradually buried beneath the weight of bills, responsibilities, and everyday life. Along the way, both husbands and wives face temptations and unexpected hardships. The couples who remain faithful to each other and protect their marriage until the very end are truly courageous. My marriage had begun with a lie, so perhaps it was only natural that it ended in heartbreak. Even after the divorce, I couldn't escape the shadow of that pain. Whenever I was alone, every memory came rushing back. Every time I tried to eat, Jackson's cruel words echoed in my mind. I would feel sick and want to throw everything back up. I ate less and less. I lost weight, but the price I paid was losing my breast milk. Luna didn't have enough milk to drink and cried all day long. Some nights, I dreamed that I was running down a deserted road with Luna in my arms. Darkness surrounded us. The only light came from a pair of headlights in the distance. I raised my hand to shield my eyes and saw that Jackson was behind the wheel. Without saying a word, he stepped on the gas and drove straight toward us. I ran while holding Luna, crying and calling his name, begging him to stop. My feet scraped across the pavement until they bled. I was exhausted. I was terrified. I wanted everything to stop, but the car kept coming, as though it wanted to take both our lives. Every time I had that dream, I woke up in panic. My forehead was covered with cold sweat. The feeling of being trapped in endless darkness, surrounded by fear and pain, is something only a woman who has been abandoned by the man she loved can truly understand. One weekend morning, Tiffany came to see me. She pulled open the heavy curtains, and sunlight poured into the room. "What are you doing?" she said. "It's already 9 in the morning, and you're still lying in bed. Mr. Than told me you've been hiding in this dark room for days." I slowly sat up. I looked lifeless. "I don't want to get up." Tiffany sighed and sat beside me. "Tell me the truth. Why did you agree to divorce Jackson so easily?" I stayed quiet for a long moment before answering. Because I knew the Jackson I loved would never come back. I didn't want to hold on to someone whose heart and body already belonged to someone else. Staying in that marriage felt like standing in a swamp. The longer I stayed, the deeper I sank until I couldn't breathe anymore. That's why I chose to divorce him. It was like cutting off a leg trapped in the mud. It hurt more than anything, but at least I could still get out. Tiffany looked at me and said, "If you've already endured the pain of cutting off that leg, then why are you still lying in the mud? You need to bandage your wounds and start walking toward the light. You're only 29. You still have your whole life ahead of you. You've spent more than 13 years living for a man who didn't deserve you. It's time to live for yourself and for your children." Even after I had started pulling myself together, Jackson came to the house again. He brought 2 large bags filled with toys for the children. Maybe, somewhere deep inside, he still felt guilty toward them. Maybe that was his way of making up for everything. I looked at him coldly. "Why are you here?" "I'm here to see the kids. And to take Mom home." Only then did I remember. Ever since Kyrie found out about his affair, she had made it clear that she wanted nothing to do with him. She had once been a wife who was betrayed herself, so she understood that pain better than anyone. She was furious with him for betraying me and for repeating the same mistake his own father had made. Even so, Jackson was still the son she had raised with her own hands. I had no right to stop him from seeing his mother. Thinking that, I opened the gate and let him in. Kyrie was lying in bed with her eyes closed. "Mom, are you not feeling well?" The moment she heard her son's voice, she opened her eyes. For an instant, joy flashed across her face. But as soon as she saw him and remembered everything he had done, her expression turned cold. She rolled over and faced the wall. Jackson refused to give up. "If you're tired, I'll drive you to my place later. Just tell McKenna what clothes you want to bring." "I'm not going anywhere," Kyrie replied. "I'm staying with my daughter." "Mom, we've already divorced. You can't stay here forever. You should come live with me." Kyrie turned back toward him. "I don't have a son who's ungrateful and heartless. I've already told you. McKenna is the only daughter-in-law I'll ever recognize. If you abandoned her, then she's my daughter now. As for you, live however you want. Don't worry about this old woman anymore." Jackson let out a helpless sigh. He looked like he had run out of patience. Before things could get worse, I stepped in. "Mom isn't feeling well. You should go." Jackson stood there for a few seconds before finally turning around and leaving. When I walked back into the bedroom, Kyrie had already sat up. Her eyes were full of tears. Cutting ties with the son she had given birth to was more painful than anyone could imagine. But she couldn't bring herself to stand beside someone who had forgotten right from wrong. I walked over and hugged her. We cried together. "This marriage may have failed," I said quietly, "but I gained a mother who loves me with all her heart." Kyrie gently stroked my hair. "From now on, you're my daughter. I'll stay here with you and the children. I'm not going anywhere." I nodded. "A long time ago, I already started thinking of you as my own mother. Just stay with us. You don't have to worry about anything." After that day, I kept telling myself that I had to pull myself together and figure out how to support Kyrie and my 2 children. The money Jackson had given me would eventually run out. I didn't have a college degree, and it would be difficult to find a good job in the city. It made more sense to move back to my hometown and start over with the only thing I knew how to do, selling seafood. This house had been Jackson's gift to me after he was promoted to director. It had once been the home where I believed our family would spend the rest of our lives together. Now, every corner of it only reminded me of the pain he had left behind. That night, I sat down with Kyrie. "Mom, I've made up my mind. I want to sell this house. The three of us can move back to my hometown. We may not have much, but we'll make it work." Kyrie looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Wherever you and the children go, that's where I'll go. Whatever you decide, I'll support you." Once I had made my decision, I didn't hesitate. I contacted a real estate agent and put the house up for sale. Since the house was still in Jackson's name, I had to let him know. He was surprised when he heard I wanted to sell it. He offered to give me enough money to keep the house for myself, but I refused. Even if he could afford to buy me another house, I didn't want him bringing Camaria into the home where I had once lived as his wife. The thought alone made me sick. When he realized he couldn't change my mind, he agreed to transfer the title so the sale could go through. We had 1 week to pack and move out. Jackson came several more times, trying to persuade Kyrie to move in with him, but she refused every time. In the end, he turned to me. "Where are you taking Mom and the kids?" I answered coldly. "That has nothing to do with you. She's still my mother, and they're still my children. You should have remembered that before you abandoned this family." Jackson had no answer. After the paperwork for selling the house was complete, I looked at him one last time before leaving. "I hope you and Camaria stay together for the rest of your lives. Don't ever let go of each other and ruin someone else's life." After I got home, I started packing our belongings. When I opened the closet, I found a row of Jackson's dress shirts still hanging there. I looked at each one. I had picked them out for him myself. No one had touched them for a long time. The shirts that had once carried my husband's warmth now hung there without a trace of life. I swallowed the lump in my throat, took every one of them down, stuffed them into a large trash bag, and tied it shut. Things that no longer belonged in my life should be thrown away like garbage. On Thursday morning, heavy rain covered the sky. Kyrie held Barack's hand while I carried Luna to the car waiting outside. Most of our belongings had already been loaded, so we only carried a few small bags with us. The car door closed, and we slowly drove away through the rain. I turned around for one last look. The White House, where I had once dreamed of growing old with my family, gradually disappeared behind the curtain of rain. I quietly said goodbye to every painful memory I had left there. From that moment on, I would begin a new life. The old house in my hometown had been left empty for years. No one had taken care of it since I got married. When we finally arrived, I almost thought we had come to an abandoned house. Tall weeds covered the path leading to the front door. Moss had spread across the walls, hiding their original color. Barack grabbed Kyrie's hand tightly. "Grandma, I'm scared." Kyrie gently stroked his head. "It's okay. Grandma's here." Most of the neighbors had already moved away. Only a few houses still had lights on. There was nowhere we could ask to stay for the night. I took a deep breath, pushed the weeds aside, and walked inside with Kyrie. Everything was covered with a thick layer of dust. I handed Luna to Kyrie, quickly gathered some dry grass, tied it together to make a broom, and told them to wait in one corner while I cleaned. After working until I was drenched in sweat, I finally cleared enough space to spread out a mat so we would have somewhere to sleep. On the way home, I had bought a few boxed meals. The three of us ate quietly while Luna sat beside us. That night, this old house was the only place we had. Barack tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, I'm scared. Can we go home? I don't want to sleep here." My throat tightened as I looked at him. "Be good, sweetheart. Sleep between Grandma and me tonight. You won't be scared. Tomorrow I'll find us a clean place to stay." At last, Barack drifted off to sleep with Kyrie, gently comforting him. Luna was still too young to understand any of it. She slept soundly beside her brother. I turned over and heard Kyrie let out a quiet sigh. I knew she wasn't asleep either. Tears rolled down my face in the darkness. I had known life would be difficult after the divorce. I had no family left to lean on. But reality was even harder than I had imagined. It felt as though I was forcing myself to walk across a narrow rope. Ahead of me was nothing but uncertainty. Behind me was a mountain I could never climb again. Below me was a bottomless cliff. There was no way back. The only thing I could do was grit my teeth and keep moving forward, one step at a time. The next morning, after making sure Kyrie and the children had breakfast, I walked around the neighborhood to see what had changed over the past few years. The poor little town I remembered was no longer the same. A new highway now cut through the hills that had once been nothing but empty land. More and more people had bought property along the main road and built houses there. With transportation becoming much more convenient, the local economy had grown quickly. The old farmers market, which used to be made up of small wooden stalls, had been rebuilt into a large, modern market in the heart of downtown. My first thought was to go back to selling seafood, so I started looking for a house close to the market. Luckily, someone told me about a 3-story house at a busy intersection that had just been put up for sale. I went there immediately. By noon, the owner agreed to sell it to me. Because I needed to move in right away, he raised the price much higher than I expected. I carefully calculated how much money I had left. If I bought the house, there would be very little left for the 3 of us. But Kyrie's health was getting worse, and my 2 children were still very young. After thinking it over, I decided to buy it anyway. That afternoon, I went back to pick up Kyrie and the children, then arranged for a moving company to transport our belongings. We didn't finish unloading everything until evening. Since the children needed someone to watch them, Kyrie could only stay in one place while I ran back and forth checking every box to make sure nothing had been lost or damaged before paying the movers. By the time I went out to buy dinner, I was exhausted. That night, we cleared out one room on the 3rd floor and slept there. The next morning, I started calling people to install everything we needed. With no man in the house, every single task fell to me. I spent my days running from place to place, cleaning, hiring painters, arranging furniture, installing the kitchen, replacing light fixtures, and making sure every dollar was spent wisely. Everything had to be affordable because my financial situation was far from stable. I only had the money from selling the house and the $100,000 Jackson had returned to me. I was afraid that by the time the renovations were finished, nearly 2/3 of my savings would be gone. Before long, my skin had grown darker again after spending every day working outside. The extra weight I had gained after giving birth had started to come off, but I was still heavier than before. Every time I came home after running errands, my clothes were soaked with sweat. Besides taking care of the house, I also had to look after Luna because she was still so young. Some days, I was so exhausted that I pulled a blanket over my head and cried until I had no tears left. The next morning, I would get up with swollen eyes and continue fixing up the house as if nothing had happened. A few people who knew me were surprised to see us back. "Didn't we hear your husband became a director and made a lot of money? Why would he let his wife come back here and struggle like this?" I never thought Jackson would turn out to be that kind of man. "You have 2 children now. It'll be hard for you to find someone else." Every time I ran into someone, I heard the same sympathetic words. Some people asked about my family out of curiosity. None of them meant any harm. Most of them genuinely felt sorry for me. But every question reminded me of my failed marriage and the life I had lost. It only made me feel more ashamed of myself. I clenched my teeth and told myself that I had to build a better life. Exactly 1 week later, I finally finished putting the house in order. I had lost almost 6 pounds, but I was satisfied with what I had accomplished. Holding Luna in my arms, I looked around our new bedroom and smiled. "This is our home now, sweetheart. Isn't it beautiful? One day, Mom's going to earn enough money to take you everywhere. You'll see the world, meet all kinds of people, and have opportunities I never had. Then, when you grow up, you'll make a much better choice in a husband than I did." My voice caught in my throat. I couldn't help wondering what Jackson was doing at that moment. Did he miss us? Even a little? He had abandoned his family for another woman. Could he really be happy after everything he had done? The pain he had left me with was so deep that I didn't know how long it would take before I could truly leave it behind. Luna didn't understand any of the thoughts running through my mind. She simply smiled, wrapped her little arms around my neck, and hugged me. The warmth of my daughter's embrace slowly eased the sadness inside me. As long as I had my children, I could get through anything. Once the house was taken care of, I turned my attention to finding work. The first thing I needed to do was enroll Barack in school. The school wasn't far from our house. During the day, Kyrie could take him there, but she would have to carry Luna with her unless I found someone to help watch the baby. As for work, I planned to go back to selling fish and seafood. But the market I used to know had changed completely. Every stall had already been assigned to someone. If I wanted a space, I would have to wait for another vendor to give one up and then apply for a vendor permit. After watching the market for several days, I noticed something. There were fewer people shopping early in the morning than there had been in the past. Life had become more comfortable, and people no longer woke up before dawn to buy groceries. Many didn't leave home until 8 or 9 o'clock. By then, the farmers' market was almost over. Seafood sold there was only kept fresh with simple methods, so by the time late shoppers arrived, it had already lost much of its freshness. That gave me an idea. If I opened a small seafood store with proper refrigeration, people could buy fresh seafood at any time of the day. I already had experience finding suppliers. The real challenge was learning how to preserve seafood properly so it would stay fresh. When Luna was 9 months old, I painfully weaned her and started visiting the seafood farms where I had bought products in the past. I reconnected with old suppliers, built new relationships, and learned as much as I could about modern storage methods. During that time, I was away from home almost every day. I usually came back in the evening, gave Luna a bath, spent a little time playing with her, put her to bed, and then stayed up late reading books, studying information online, and planning my business. Kyrie took care of Barack almost entirely by herself. Without her, I don't know how I could have managed. Even though I left early and came home late every day, she never once complained or asked what I was doing. She knew how hard I was working. At every meal, she quietly put the best pieces of meat into my bowl. A month passed, but my plan still hadn't moved forward. I only had a small amount of money. Opening this store meant putting almost everything I had into one last gamble. If I failed, the 4 of us might not even have enough to eat. That was why I had to be careful with every decision. Watching the balance in my bank account shrink day by day, I measured every dollar I spent on food and milk. I stayed up later every night, searching for better ideas and better ways to make the business succeed. 2 months later, construction on my store finally began. I turned the first floor of our house into a seafood shop. My suppliers were already lined up, so I focused on buying refrigerators and installing cold storage. Right in the middle of the floor, I had a large water tank built with a full oxygen system so customers could always choose live fish. For the rest of the seafood, I relied on refrigerated storage to keep it fresh. Years earlier, another seafood vendor had taught me how to make squid cakes. I decided to sell those as well. After 2 weeks of nonstop work, the sign Makana's Seafood and Squid Cakes finally went up. Not long afterward, my first shipment arrived. The store was filled with people carrying boxes in and out. I worked alongside them, hauling heavy loads just like everyone else. There were only women and children in my family now. I had no choice but to become strong enough to carry everything on my own. From now on, I had to be both a mother and a father to my children. On Monday morning, the store officially opened for business. Kyrie dressed Barack and Luna in new clothes, and the 2 of them excitedly watched the live fish swimming inside the large tank. Since it was opening day, friends, neighbors, and old customers all came to support us. Tiffany was busy working at her salon back in Norfolk, but she still called and told me to send her 11 pounds of squid cakes. That night, after closing the store, I sat under the lights counting every dollar and writing everything into my ledger. Buying equipment, renovating the store, and stocking inventory had cost far more than I expected. When I checked my bank account, I had less than $3,000 left. Yet I still had to pay for food, milk, diapers, and everything else my family needed. I let out a long breath. I could only hope this gamble would succeed. At the very least, I wanted to earn enough to feed the people depending on me. Maybe life had finally decided to give me a break after everything I had been through. From the day the store opened, customers came in steadily. Since homemade squid cakes were still something new in the area, I offered everyone a free sample. Little by little, more people started buying them. 3 months later, my squid cakes had become one of the store's best-selling items. Orders increased noticeably. Some customers bought them as gifts, while others ordered large batches for family gatherings and celebrations. More and more people began asking specifically for Makana's squid cakes. Before I knew it, I was completely absorbed in my work. As I grew busier, the pain from my broken marriage slowly faded. If there was one thing that could pull a person out of heartbreak the fastest, it was keeping yourself so busy that you no longer had time to dwell on it. As business improved, so did our income. We no longer had to count every dollar before buying groceries. I was finally able to buy vitamins for Kyrie and switch the children to a better brand of milk. The only downside was that I worked almost nonstop. Every night I stayed up until midnight balancing the books, then got up again at 3 in the morning to prepare fresh squid cakes for the day's orders. Without trying, I lost several more pounds. Seeing me work that hard, Kyrie finally said, "You should hire someone to help. One person can't keep this up forever." I knew she was right, so I started looking for an employee. 2 days later, I found someone to work with me. Her name was Nia. She had moved here a little over a year earlier after her divorce. She was 2 years older than I was, but she looked much younger. She had a gentle kind of beauty that immediately made people feel comfortable around her. Nia was a traditional woman. She was kind, hardworking, and had once worked as an office employee. Through an arrangement between their families, she had married a college professor. By all appearances, they had a happy marriage. Every day after work, she hurried home to cook, clean, and take care of the house. Her husband came home on time, never drank, and never stayed out late. To everyone around them, they were the perfect family. But more than 3 years earlier, Nia discovered that her husband had been having an affair. One of his students came from a difficult family background. He often encouraged and comforted her. Somehow, that comfort turned into a relationship. What hurt even more was that during the affair, he became even more attentive and affectionate toward Nia. That was why she had been completely shocked when she found the messages between them. People often say there are 2 kinds of men who cheat. One grows cold toward his family. The other feels guilty and becomes even more caring toward his wife to hide what he's doing. Jackson belonged to the first kind. Nia's husband belonged to the second. When everything came to light, everyone in her family admitted that her husband was wrong. Even so, they still urged her to forgive him and keep the family together. Nia loved him deeply, so she endured the pain and gave him another chance. A little over a year later, she found out he had another affair. That was the moment she decided she had had enough. She divorced him and moved here to begin again. I couldn't help sighing. I really don't understand men. I can accept Jackson leaving me because I let myself go after having children. But you're beautiful. How could your husband still cheat on you? Nia smiled faintly. A man who's always chasing something new will never be satisfied, no matter how beautiful his wife is. Then she looked at me. To be honest, I admire your courage. I laughed awkwardly. You admire me? The first time I found out my husband was cheating, I was angry, but I was also afraid. I was afraid no one would ever want a divorced woman. I was afraid of what people would say. That's why I forgave him. And all it got me was another betrayal. You were brave enough to walk away before he could hurt you again. I smiled bitterly. If Jackson had shown even a little regret and asked me to forgive him, I honestly don't know what I would have done. I had loved him for so many years. But he never once asked me to stay. All he wanted was a divorce so he could be with his first love. Nia nodded. A man who truly values his family will never surrender to temptation. But once someone crosses that line, it's very hard for them to come back. No one can truly understand another person's pain unless they've lived through it themselves. Maybe because we had gone through the same kind of heartbreak. Nia and I connected almost immediately. I hired her that very day. She loved children too. So whenever she had a free moment, she would help me look after Barack and Luna. Almost a year earlier, I had fallen into the deepest pit of my life, carrying Luna in my arms and holding Barack's hand as I came back to my hometown to start over. Now, little by little, life was finally becoming stable again. I still didn't have much time for myself, but at least I no longer had to worry about whether my family would have enough to eat. Months of non-stop work had its rewards. I had lost the extra weight, and as my confidence slowly returned, so did my smile. Whenever Tiffany saw me on a video call, she could hardly believe I was the same woman who had spent her days hiding under a blanket, crying in a dark room just a few months earlier. Business continued to grow. I gradually reduced the amount of fresh seafood I sold and focused more on making squid cakes in larger quantities. I remodeled the entire first floor, turning part of it into a small production area. Before long, I hired 3 more employees to help prepare the squid cakes while making sure the quality stayed the same. Looking back, it all felt strangely ironic. I had never dreamed of becoming a business owner or building a successful company. When I was 18 or 19, all I wanted was to marry the man I loved, have children, and live an ordinary, peaceful life. But life had other plans. The betrayal I went through left me with no choice except to become stronger. I had to become the pillar of my family. The day before, I had heard someone say, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." Maybe I was living proof that those words were true. A woman who survives the pain of divorce carries the weight of several lifetimes. And at last, I was standing firmly on my own 2 feet. That morning, Nia asked for the day off. She told me a relative was coming to visit. It turned out to be her cousin, Aaron, who was 3 years older than she was and currently managed a large seafood restaurant chain. Nia had already told him about my squid cakes and wanted him to consider adding them to his restaurant's menu. If I could secure this partnership, my business could grow several times over. After hearing that, I made sure to dress neatly and waited for Nia to bring Aaron to see our production facility. Around noon, Nia returned with a tall man. He had a strong, well-defined face, a solid build, and broad shoulders that gave him a calm, dependable presence. Even though it was our first meeting, I was immediately impressed by the confidence he carried. Nia smiled as she introduced us. "This is my cousin, Aaron. He manages a restaurant chain. And this is Makena, the owner here." I smiled awkwardly. "I'm not much of a boss." Then I turned to him politely. "Nice to meet you. I'm Makena." "Nice to meet you too," he replied. "I'm Aaron." That day I was wearing a simple white button-down shirt with a pair of wide-leg dress pants. It was a modest, professional outfit, but I wanted to show my respect to anyone who came to visit my business. After talking for a while, I took Aaron through the workshop to show him how we made our squid cakes. Even though Nia had told me he managed a large restaurant chain, he never acted superior. On the contrary, he was friendly and down to earth. He didn't talk much, but every question he asked went straight to the point. His professionalism made me feel a little self-conscious. After all, he had years of experience running a successful business, while I had only recently started my own. Aaron seemed to notice my nervousness. He gently changed the subject to help me relax. "Why didn't you look for a stable job instead of starting your own business?" I smiled. "I only finished high school. Finding a steady job that paid enough to support my 2 children wasn't easy. I used to sell seafood and already knew a few suppliers, so I decided to take a chance and become my own boss. Besides," I paused before continuing, "I've learned that depending on other people is never as reliable as depending on yourself. The life I build and the choices I make should be in my own hands." Aaron looked at me and smiled with quiet approval. Nia walked behind us the entire afternoon, watching the 2 of us with a knowing smile. When Aaron finally left, she nudged me with her elbow. "So, what do you think of my cousin?" "What do you mean?" I asked, embarrassed. Nia laughed. "He's a kind, hardworking man. He was married a few years ago, and everyone thought they had a happy marriage. Then, after only 1 year, his wife insisted on getting a divorce. Ever since then, he's buried himself in work and hasn't opened his heart to anyone. My aunt and uncle worry about him all the time. Lately, he's finally started meeting new people again. Honestly, I think the 2 of you would make a great match." I quickly shook my head. "I'm not thinking about anything like that right now. I just want a peaceful life so I can take care of Mom and my children." Nia nodded. "I know women like us carry a lot of fear after what we've been through, but you can't stay trapped in that fear forever." I grew up with Aaron. I know what kind of man he is. I didn't know how to answer her, so I laughed and changed the subject. "If you've got this much free time, maybe you should worry about finishing those 66 pounds of squid cakes instead of trying to play matchmaker." I slipped my arm around her shoulders and steered her back toward the kitchen. "I'm not some young girl anymore. Right now, I like my peaceful life, just the way it is." A week later, I received a partnership proposal from Aaron. He wanted to become the exclusive distributor of my squid cakes. Not long afterward, he came back to discuss the details. Aaron's company would invest in helping me build a larger production facility, and I would be responsible for supplying squid cakes to every restaurant in his chain. It was the biggest business opportunity I had ever received. Since squid cakes were a brand new item on his menu, Aaron took this partnership very seriously. He even rented a house nearby, so it would be easier for us to work together. As time went on, Aaron and I met more and more often. The longer I worked with him, the more I realized what kind of man he was. He was gentle, but he was also decisive when it came to business. Whenever there was something I didn't understand, he never made me feel embarrassed. Instead, he patiently explained everything in the simplest way until I understood. From time to time, he also shared his experience in business and the way he looked at life. Every conversation with him gave me a new perspective, and I couldn't help admiring the depth of his thinking. Nia was still doing everything she could to bring the two of us closer together. But between Aaron and me, there was never anything rushed. Aaron wasn't the type of man who pushed his feelings onto someone else, and I certainly wasn't looking for another relationship. If I had never been married, if I had never gone through a divorce, I probably would have allowed myself to imagine what a future with a man like Aaron might look like. But life had changed me. I was no longer the young woman who dreamed of becoming someone's quiet support. I was a divorced mother with 2 children and an aging mother to care for. All I wanted was to stand on my own 2 feet. To make this partnership succeed, Aaron and I had countless things to discuss. We had to decide where to build the new production facility, where to source ingredients, and how to improve the recipe and production process. Sometimes we drove long distances together to inspect seafood suppliers. Aaron always insisted on driving. Nia loved teasing us. I've never seen my cousin work this hard for anyone before. Now he's even become your personal chauffeur. I could only smile awkwardly and tell her to stop teasing me. Even though I was already the mother of 2 children, I still found myself blushing whenever she said things like that. Part of me was afraid. What if Aaron only saw me as a business partner? I didn't want her jokes to make things uncomfortable between us. After 4 months of preparation, my first production facility was finally completed. Our original team consisted of 10 people, including Nia and me. That evening, after our first day of production, Aaron and I took everyone to a nearby restaurant to celebrate. After working side by side for months, the conversations between Aaron and me had become much more relaxed than before. As everyone was getting ready to leave, I took the opportunity to thank him. Thank you so much. If it weren't for you, I don't know how many more years it would have taken me to build a factory like this. Aaron smiled and gently shook his head. Don't say that. You're talented, and you're stronger than you give yourself credit for. You would have succeeded sooner or later. As he said those words, he looked at me with a warmth and kindness I had never noticed before. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly looked away, trying to steady myself. Aaron was supposed to drive both Nia and me home that night, but Nia suddenly said she needed to give another woman from the factory a ride. That left only Aaron and me in the car. An unusual silence filled the space between us. Normally, we'd spend the drive talking about work, planning the next steps for the factory. But that night, there was nothing left to discuss. I found myself feeling strangely nervous. What are you thinking about? Aaron asked softly. Nothing, I answered. I'm just still worried about the factory? A little. Aaron smiled. Don't worry, I'll be here with you every step of the way. Those simple words calmed me more than he probably realized. I kept telling myself he was only talking about work. Even so, my heart couldn't help hearing them a different way. When we arrived at my house, Aaron picked up 2 gift bags from the back seat and handed them to me. These are for the kids, I smiled awkwardly. You really didn't have to bring them anything. They're for Barack and Luna, not for you. I laughed and accepted them. Thank you. Come visit the kids whenever you have time. I will. Good night, Aaron. Good night, Makina. I turned and started walking toward the front door. After only a few steps, I heard him call my name. Makina. I turned around. Yes? He looked at me for a moment. It seemed as if there was something he wanted to say, but in the end, he only smiled. Sleep well, I smiled back. You too. The next morning, I assumed Aaron would return to Norfolk now that everything at the factory had been settled. To my surprise, he showed up at the factory again. You're not going back? I asked. Aaron looked at me and smiled. I told you I'd be here with you every step of the way. I was caught off guard. I lowered my eyes, avoiding his steady gaze. After everything I had been through, and with the instincts of a woman who had once been deeply hurt, how could I fail to notice that Aaron cared about me in a way that went beyond business? But there was always a voice inside me urging me to stay away. I buried myself even deeper in work, trying to push those thoughts aside. Since the factory had only just started operating, new problems came up almost every day. I often stayed until late at night trying to solve them. Aaron was always there beside me, patiently helping me analyze every issue, find the best solution, and then drive me home afterward. One afternoon, while we were in the middle of a meeting, I took a sip of water. A sudden wave of dizziness hit me. I shook my head, hoping it would pass, but everything in front of me became blurry. Dark spots filled my vision. I felt my body give way beneath me. The last thing I remembered was hearing someone call my name in a panicked voice. Meghna! Meghna! Are you okay? When I opened my eyes again, it was already the next morning. I found myself lying in a hospital bed. Carrie was sitting beside me. The moment she saw I was awake, she quickly wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and helped me sit up. You're awake. How are you feeling? It had been a long time since I had slowed down enough to really look at her. Her hair had turned grayer. The lines on her face had grown deeper, and the wrinkles around her eyes seemed more noticeable than before. I answered weakly, I'm okay, Mom. Kyrie let out a sigh. You have to take care of yourself. You worked until you collapsed. How can your body handle that? Starting tomorrow, I'll bring lunch to the factory every day. I shook my head gently. I'll be fine. You already take care of Barack and Luna. I can't ask you to worry about me too. Tears filled Kyrie's eyes. If only Jackson hadn't treated you so cruelly, none of this would have happened. It had been a long time since anyone had mentioned his name in front of me. I reached over and gently held Kyrie's weathered hand. Don't worry, Mom. I'm really okay. Kyrie nodded. When Aaron called me last night, I was terrified. I looked at her in surprise. Aaron called you? He did. I couldn't come right away because I had to stay home with the children. This morning, I took Luna to the neighbors before coming here. Aaron stayed with you all night. I had to tell him several times before he finally went home to get some rest. I sat there in silence, thinking about the calm, dependable man who had quietly stayed by my side through the night. Kyrie gently patted my hand. He really does seem like a kind, honest man. If you ever think about getting married again, you should give someone like him a chance. I let out a quiet sigh. Mom, right now all I want is to take care of you, Barack, and Luna. Kyrie smiled sadly. I raised Jackson by myself. I know better than anyone how hard it is to raise children alone. I'm only afraid that Jackson hurt you so deeply you'll never let anyone into your heart again. If you can, try opening your heart one more time. Then I'll feel a little less guilty for what my son did to you. I held her hand a little tighter. I knew she loved me as if I were her own daughter. She only wanted me to be happy. I couldn't bring myself to reject her advice outright, but I still didn't know what Aaron truly meant to me. I also didn't know how he really felt about me. What if everything I was imagining was nothing more than wishful thinking? After my divorce, there were times when I longed for a good man to appear in my life. Someone strong enough to help me through the darkest days. Someone I could lean on when life became too heavy. But after learning to stand on my own, I realized that way of thinking wasn't right. Mountains can crumble. People can walk away. In the end, the only person I could truly depend on was myself. If I ever chose to be with someone again, it would be because we were right for each other, not because I needed someone to carry me. Sometimes, when I saw the other women at the factory going home to have dinner with their husbands and children, I felt a little lonely. But that loneliness wasn't enough to make me rush into another relationship. Aaron and I had only begun to know each other. Talking about marriage now was far too soon. After the IV was finished, I was discharged from the hospital. Aaron drove over to pick Kyrie and me up. Even though I felt awkward, he had come all the way there, so I couldn't refuse. As soon as we arrived home, Barack came running out, carrying Luna in his arms. I hurried over, wrapped one arm around Barack, and lifted Luna into my embrace. My daughter buried her face against my shoulder, and my eyes grew warm. They must have been so frightened while I was in the hospital. When Kyrie saw Aaron carrying my bag inside, she invited him to stay for dinner. I thought he would politely decline, but he agreed without hesitation. I was still weak, so I was about to call Nia to come help prepare the meal. Before I could, Aaron had already stepped into the kitchen to help Kyrie cook. He handled everything with ease. I had almost forgotten that he managed restaurants and had learned from professional chefs. By the time Nia arrived, the table was already full of food. She looked at me with a teasing smile. Another point in his favor. He can cook, too. I felt my face grow warm and gently tugged on her sleeve. Come on, sit down and eat. Throughout dinner, Aaron kept talking and joking with Barack until he couldn't stop smiling. My son clearly adored him. Every now and then, Aaron would turn to Luna, making funny faces and talking to her. She was already a year and a half old and happily sat on my lap, nibbling on a chicken drumstick until her little mouth was covered with grease. Watching the way Aaron played with my children stirred something inside me. I couldn't help wondering how wonderful it would have been if their own father had loved them this much. Seeing how naturally Aaron cared for children made me admire him even more. After dinner, we cleaned up together, and I walked him to his car. He looked at me gently. Go inside and get some rest. You're still recovering. Leave everything at the factory to me for now. Thank you. You've already helped me so much. Aaron smiled. If you keep thanking me like this, I'm going to be upset. Then he seemed to remember something. Barack asked me to help him with a few math problems earlier, but I didn't get the chance. If it's okay with you, I'll come by another day and help him with his homework. I froze for a moment. Lately, I'd been spending almost all my time at the factory. Kyrie had become the one taking care of Barack and Luna most of the day. Barack was almost 8 years old now. He needed someone to guide him as he grew up. The hardest part for children whose parents divorce is that no matter how much one parent tries, it's impossible to fill every role alone. Aaron was kind, well-educated, and patient. The thought of him helping Barack made me smile. Of course, I'd really appreciate that. Aaron gave me a warm smile, reminded me once more to get plenty of rest, then got into his car and drove away. I stood there watching his taillights disappear into the distance. A quiet thought crossed my mind. Should I finally open my heart to him? Or should I keep protecting the peaceful life I'd worked so hard to rebuild? 2 days later, I returned to work. When I got to the factory, I found a steamed bun and a warm bottle of soy milk sitting inside my locker. I immediately remembered one morning when Aaron and I had left early to visit suppliers. I had bought the exact same breakfast for both of us because I didn't know what he liked to eat. Back then, I had told him, I don't know what you like, so I bought what I usually eat. I never expected him to remember something so small. Our first shipment to his restaurant chain received excellent feedback. Not long afterward, the restaurants increased their orders. I was happy because the factory could keep growing, but I was also nervous. I wasn't sure whether I could continue meeting their expectations over the long term. Over the next several months, Aaron never returned to Norfolk. He stayed by my side, guiding me, advising me, and helping the factory grow. At first, I believed he stayed only because of our partnership. But by then, everything at the factory was already running smoothly, and he still refused to leave. I wasn't naive. I could clearly see how he felt about me. Aaron never did anything dramatic. He simply stayed beside me, quietly taking care of me in countless little ways. None of those gestures were extraordinary on their own, yet together they made me feel cherished. His kindness was like a gentle stream, slowly melting the ice that had surrounded my heart for so long. Even so, deep inside me, there was still a fear I couldn't let go of. Ever since that dinner at my house, Aaron had started coming over to spend time with the children more often. In just a few months, Barack had begun treating him like a close friend. Hardly a day went by without him mentioning Aaron. Even Luna, who had barely spoken before, would now reach out her little arms whenever she saw Uncle Aaron, asking him to carry her. One evening during dinner, Barack suddenly said, "I wish Uncle Aaron were my dad." Naya burst into laughter. I immediately looked at my son. "Barack, don't say things like that in front of Uncle Aaron, okay?" He lowered his head with a disappointed look. All my friends have both their mom and dad picking them up from school. Even my friend Noah's dad, who's in the Navy and is away most of the time, came to school wearing his uniform the other day. Everyone thought he looked so cool. I've seen him too, but Uncle Aaron is even taller. I quietly lowered my head and forced another bite of food into my mouth. As children grow older, they begin to notice the difference between having a father and not having one. I couldn't stop wondering what would happen if someone at school ever said something that hurt Barack because of our family. In the end, it was the adults who made the mistakes, yet innocent children were always the ones who carried the deepest scars. Even so, children who grow up through hardship often become more thoughtful and mature than others their age. Barack truly was a kind-hearted little boy. After that evening, he never brought it up again. A few weeks later, on International Women's Day, he came to the factory carrying a handmade card. I was surprised to see him there and hurried outside to greet him. He wrapped his arms around my neck and handed me the card. "Mom, this is for you. I hope you're always as beautiful as a flower." I laughed, wondering who had taught him to say something so sweet. When I opened the card, I found a neatly written greeting and a drawing he had made himself. The picture showed Grandma, me, Barack, Luna, and a man standing a little farther away. I pointed to the man and smiled. "Who's this?" "That's Uncle Aaron." I froze. It had been almost 2 years since Jackson and I divorced. Barack had spent nearly 6 years living with his father before everything fell apart. Aaron had been part of our lives for less than a year. Yet when Barack drew a picture of his family, it was Aaron standing beside us instead of Jackson. I gently rubbed my son's hair, unsure whether I should feel happy or heartbroken. Just then, Aaron walked into the factory carrying a small gift box. "Happy Women's Day." "Thank you," I smiled and accepted it. Barack grinned from ear to ear. "Uncle Aaron bought Mom a present!" Nia immediately joined in. "So, Barack, would you like your mom to marry Uncle Aaron?" My face instantly turned red. I was about to tell her not to joke about that in front of the children when Barack answered without any hesitation. "Yes! Uncle Aaron is really nice." Whenever I can't solve my homework, he teaches me. He always brings me snacks too. And I can tell he really cares about Mom. He makes her smile. I want Mom to be happy. If Mom marries Uncle Aaron, then I'll have a dad again. His innocent words brought tears to my eyes. People often say single mothers sacrifice everything for their children. But from another perspective, I was the one who chose to bring my children into this world. Loving them and raising them was my responsibility. Seeing how deeply Barack and Luna loved me made every hardship worthwhile. At that moment, I realized something else. Without me noticing, Aaron had quietly become part of our lives. When I got home that evening, I opened the gift Aaron had given me. Inside was a small bottle of hand cream. Tucked beside it was a handwritten note. He wrote that I spent all day working at the factory and should take good care of my hands because they would crack easily during the winter. My heart, which had been cold for so long, suddenly beat a little faster. The gift was just like Aaron himself. It wasn't expensive or flashy, but it was exactly what I needed. After that day, Aaron and I gradually grew closer. I stopped refusing when he offered to drive me home. Sometimes, after work, we would go for a walk together at night and talk about life. Aaron told me many stories about his past, including his previous marriage. But no matter how much we talked, he never revealed why they had divorced. I noticed that every time he spoke about that part of his life, there was sadness in his voice. Even so, he never once criticized or blamed his ex-wife. That made me realize even more what a mature and generous man he was. Just when I thought I might finally be ready to open my heart and accept Aaron, the person I believed I had already left behind suddenly appeared again. That evening, when I returned home from the factory, I immediately noticed that Kyrie didn't look well. The moment I stepped inside, I saw Jackson, the ex-husband who had betrayed me, sitting quietly in the living room. Even though he had deliberately dressed in a white dress shirt and slacks, he looked painfully worn down. The confident, successful director I once knew was gone. His face had become gaunt. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes, and even from where I stood, I could see the stubble covering his jaw. I had believed I had finally moved on from the pain of our divorce. But the moment I saw Jackson again after 2 years, my heart tightened all over again. Jackson stared at me in shock. "Makena, you've changed so much. Why are you here?" I asked coldly. "I came to see Mom, the kids, and you." Kyrie sat down beside me, directly across from him. I could tell from her eyes that seeing her son like this hurt her deeply, but her voice remained firm. "If you had truly remembered us, you wouldn't have waited until now to come." "Mom, I'm sorry." I looked straight at him. "I don't need your apology. Back then, you threw away your family to chase what you called true love. Now you've come back to disturb our lives again?" Without warning, Jackson dropped to his knees. He slapped himself across the face as tears streamed down his cheeks. "Mom, I was wrong. McKenna, I was wrong. I lost my way. I deserve every punishment that's come to me. Please, just give me one chance to make things right." Then he looked directly at me. "I'm truly sorry." I let out a cold laugh. "If saying I'm sorry could erase every mistake, we wouldn't need the police." Jackson lowered his head. "I'll accept whatever you want to say to me. I only want to come home. Please, let me come back to you and the kids. Don't you want our children to grow up with both parents?" I couldn't listen anymore. I stood up. "If you had really cared about your children, you never would have done what you did in the first place. Leave. I'll never forgive you." That night, Tiffany called me. She told me everything that had happened to Jackson after our divorce. It turned out that while the divorce paperwork was being finalized, Camaria told Jackson she was pregnant. That was why he had never fought me for custody of the children. After she gave birth to a baby boy, the two of them seemed happier than ever. Jackson proudly introduced her to everyone at his company. But once they started living together, everything changed. Camaria had always been spoiled. She refused to cook, clean, or take care of the family. Jackson tolerated it while she was pregnant. Even after the baby was born, she spent her days lying on the couch, scrolling through her phone instead of helping around the house. They argued constantly. About 6 months earlier, Camaria convinced Jackson to invest in a business with one of her old friends from overseas. She persuaded him that it was the opportunity of a lifetime. Jackson borrowed money and invested everything he had. At the last moment, the man disappeared with all the money. When Jackson desperately searched for Camaria, he discovered that she had already run away with the baby. Only then did he learn the truth. The man who had taken the money was actually Camaria's former boyfriend. Years ago, after they broke up, she met Jackson and decided to stay with him because he had become successful. Later, when her ex came back, the two of them worked together to deceive Jackson. Even the little boy Jackson believed was his son turned out to be the other man's child. Overnight, Jackson went from being a respected company director to drowning in debt. He had to sell his house, sell his car, and even embezzle company funds to repay what he owed. When everything came to light, he was fired and forced to pay the company back. He lost everything. Only then did he remember the overweight wife he had once abandoned. As Tiffany told me everything, she couldn't stop laughing. I knew it wasn't right to take pleasure in someone else's misfortune. But I was only human. After hearing how the man who had betrayed me ended up paying such a painful price, I couldn't deny that part of me felt relieved. Even so, almost 2 years had already passed. I had no interest in mocking him any further. Jackson kept coming back, begging me to give him another chance. Sometimes he even waited outside Barack's school, hoping to see him. But the moment Barack saw him, he burst into tears. The school security guards thought Jackson was trying to kidnap a child. The only person Jackson could still reach was Kyrie. After all, he was the son she had carried, given birth to, and raised with her own hands. Watching him lose everything like this broke her heart. One evening after dinner, Kyrie came into my room. Luna was already asleep beside me. She gently held my hand. "McKenna, I know what I'm about to ask is unfair, but these past few weeks, Jackson truly seems to regret what he did. He's suffering now, and he deserves it. Even so, he's still Barack's father. You're raising 2 children on your own. If there's still even a little feeling left in your heart, could you give him one more chance?" I understood why she was asking. I wasn't angry with her. She only wanted her children to be happy. She wanted her grandchildren to grow up with a complete family. I gently patted her hand. "I understand, Mom. I know why you're saying this, but you also saw how Jackson treated me and the children back then. Even if I could forgive him, I could never go back to him. I don't have the strength to live beside him as husband and wife anymore. Some things, once they're broken, can never be put back the way they were." Kyrie let out a quiet sigh. I smiled, trying to reassure her. "Don't worry. I won't stop Jackson from visiting you or the children. As long as I'm here, he's welcome to see them." After that, Jackson came by more often. But every time he arrived, I quietly walked away. I wanted nothing more to do with him. One evening, as I was leaving the factory, Jackson was waiting outside. He stepped directly in front of me. Let me drive you home. I frowned and deliberately kept my distance. No, I can get home by myself. Jackson ignored my refusal and reached out to grab my hand. The instant he touched me, my skin crawled. I yanked my arm away with all my strength. Let go of me. I said I can get home on my own. Let her go. Aaron's voice rang out. He strode over, pulled Jackson away from me, and stepped in front of me without hesitation. At that moment, his broad back felt like the safest place in the world. Jackson glared at him. Who are you? Why are you sticking your nose into my family? Aaron looked at him coldly. Family? You must have forgotten that you and McKenna are divorced. You're not her family anymore, Jackson frowned. This has nothing to do with you. What gives you the right to interfere? Then, as if something suddenly occurred to him, he turned toward me. Is this why you refuse to come back to me? Are you seeing him now? I met his eyes without backing down. That's my business. It has nothing to do with you. Jackson laughed bitterly. Don't forget, you have 2 children with me. So what if you've lost weight? You're still not beautiful. You don't have a college degree. You're divorced, and you have 2 kids. Do you really think a man like him would sincerely love a woman like you? Look at who he is. Maybe you're nothing more than a game to him. His words made my whole body shake with anger. After all this time, he still saw me as nothing more than the overweight, unattractive woman who stayed home waiting for her husband. Before I could answer, Aaron spoke first. Now I understand why you betrayed McKenna. It's because you never had the eyes to see her true worth. Jackson fell silent. Aaron continued, She may not be the most beautiful woman in the world, but she's one of the strongest women I've ever met. She's hardworking, thoughtful, devoted to the people she loves, and willing to sacrifice everything for her family. I admire her, and I respect her more than you could ever understand. Jackson stared at him in disbelief. Aaron took another step forward. I'm warning you. Stop interfering with McKenna's life. You have no right to ask her to come back to you. She's suffered enough because of you. From now on, I won't give you another chance to hurt her. I stood there in silence. I had never imagined that someone as calm and reserved as Aaron could speak with such conviction. He gently took my hand and led me to his car, leaving Jackson standing there without a word. In truth, Aaron had known Jackson was back for quite some time. He simply didn't want to pressure me or influence my decision. He had never once brought up Jackson or asked what I planned to do. He wanted to respect whatever choice I made. But after seeing Jackson grab my arm that day, Aaron could no longer stand by and watch. Even after Aaron warned Jackson to stay away from me, he didn't give up. Every now and then, he still came to the house to visit Kyrie and the children, hoping he would get a chance to see me. But because of Jackson's sudden return, the fear I had worked so hard to overcome slowly crept back into my heart. Once again, I found myself hesitating whenever I thought about taking the next step with Aaron. Aaron had been nothing but kind to me. Still, I couldn't stop asking myself the same questions. What if one day he changed the way Jackson had? What if we had a child together? Would he still love Barack and Luna the same way he did now? Those thoughts stayed with me day and night. Aaron seemed to understand exactly what I was struggling with, but he never pressured me for an answer. He never asked me to make a decision. He simply stayed beside me, quietly waiting. The relationship between the 3 of us remained awkward like that until winter arrived. As the weather turned colder, people began getting sick more easily, especially children and the elderly. Luna came down with pneumonia first. Then Barack developed a cough that wouldn't go away. Kyrie and I spent every day worrying about them. By the time both children finally recovered, Kyrie was the one who ended up in the hospital. Her health had never fully recovered, and the constant heartache over Jackson had taken an even greater toll on her. This time, she became seriously ill. The coughing wouldn't stop. Jackson came by a few times after hearing she was hospitalized, but he was trying to earn money to repay his debts and couldn't stay for long. I didn't expect anything from him anymore. I stayed by Kyrie's bedside every day. Thankfully, Aaron and Nia took care of Barack and Luna while I remained at the hospital. Aaron often brought the children to visit their grandmother. Those were the only moments when Kyrie seemed to have a little more strength. No matter how hard I tried to care for her, none of us could escape the laws of life. One foggy morning, Kyrie took her final breath. She no longer had the strength to leave any last words. She simply held my hand tightly, smiled at me one last time, and slowly closed her eyes. At that moment, I felt as if I could see the warm smile of the kind neighbor who had once cared for us so many years ago. Maybe life really doesn't take everything away from a person. I had lost both my parents, but in return, I had been given another mother who loved me with all her heart and stood by me through my darkest days. Losing Kyrie was one of the greatest heartbreaks of my life. Thankfully, Aaron never left my side. He quietly took charge of everything that needed to be done for the funeral, making sure I didn't have to face it alone. When Jackson heard the news, he rushed back immediately. He dropped to his knees in front of Carrie's casket and cried for what felt like forever. The funeral wasn't large. Most of Carrie's relatives had already passed away. Nearly everyone who came was a neighbor or an old friend. Even so, they all mourned the gentle, kind-hearted woman she had always been. Half a month after the funeral, Jackson came to say goodbye before leaving Norfolk to start over somewhere else. He hugged Barack and Luna tightly before turning to me. "I regret everything," he said quietly. "We had a peaceful family. We were happy. I was the one who threw it all away because I wasn't satisfied with what I already had. I chased after things that looked beautiful on the outside and lost you and the children because of it. True love. A beautiful woman. None of it was real. It was all a lie." He let out a long breath before continuing. "Now I finally understand. You were worth more than everything I threw away. But I realized it too late. No matter how much I regret it now, nothing can change the past." He looked at me one last time. "I only hope you'll be happy." I looked back at him without turning away. Neither of us spoke another word. But in that silence, I think we both understood that everything between us had finally come to an end. After Jackson left, I returned to my work. But the grief of losing Kyrie, combined with weeks of exhaustion from caring for her and arranging the funeral, finally caught up with me. This time, I was the one who became seriously ill. Whenever I got sick before, Kyrie was always there to help take care of the children. But now that she was gone, I didn't know what to do. I tried to ignore the pounding in my head and force myself out of bed to make breakfast. Before I could stand up, a bowl of hot porridge was gently placed on the bedside table. I looked up and saw Aaron. Behind him stood two small figures, Barack and Luna. "Barack told me you were sick," Aaron said softly. "Why didn't you call me?" I coughed several times and didn't know how to answer. Aaron quickly helped me lie back down. "Just stay here with Luna for a while. I'll take Barack to school and come right back." He handed Barack a piece of toast for breakfast, then hurried him out the door. Watching him leave, I felt my eyes begin to sting. Maybe when your body is weak, your heart becomes fragile too. At that moment, I truly felt what it was like to have someone I could lean on. Aaron had quietly become that person for me. I stayed sick for half a month. During that entire time, Aaron ran back and forth every day. He managed the factory, drove Barack to and from school, cooked for the children and me, and even read bedtime stories to Luna every night. It wasn't until we had gone through that difficult time together that I fully understood how sincere he had always been. Little by little, Aaron's warmth and patience finally broke through the fear I had been carrying inside me for so long. For the first time since my divorce, I allowed myself to believe in love again. One evening, as Aaron was helping me eat another bowl of porridge, I reached out and gently took his hand. "Thank you for everything," Aaron smiled. "I've already told you. If you keep thanking me, I'm going to be upset." Then he looked at me with a teasing smile. "Instead of thanking me with words, maybe you could show me another way," I laughed. "What kind of way?" Aaron grinned. "How about marrying me?" I couldn't help smiling. "You really don't mind?" Aaron froze, staring at me as though he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Are you serious?" I nodded. Looking into his eyes, I said softly, "After Mom's mourning period is over, would you build a family with me?" Aaron tried to stay calm, but the joy in his eyes gave him away. He gently wrapped me in his arms. My small frame rested safely against his broad chest. After I recovered, Aaron took me to meet his parents. By then, after everything I had been through, I had lost a great deal of weight. I was finally wearing a size small again. My facial features hadn't changed much, but standing on my own 2 feet had given me a confidence I had never had before. I was no longer the insecure, overweight woman I had been 2 years earlier. I was a strong, independent mother who had rebuilt her own life. Even so, I couldn't help feeling nervous as we drove to Aaron's parents' house. I brought Barack and Luna with me because I wanted his parents to know exactly who I was and understand the life I had lived. To my surprise, they welcomed the three of us with incredible warmth. Part of that was thanks to Nia, who had spent a long time telling them how hardworking and capable I was. They were overjoyed that Aaron had finally opened his heart again after his divorce. They considered themselves lucky that he had found someone like me. They also adored Barack and Luna, treating them as if they were already their own grandchildren. With everyone's blessing, Aaron and I officially became a couple a little more than a year later. After everything life had put me through, I had finally found the peaceful harbor I had been searching for. Together, Aaron and I managed the factory. Together, we raised Barack and Luna. Together, we shared the small joys that filled our everyday lives. My days were full of happiness again. Barack and Luna adored Aaron. Every other sentence began with, "Dad Aaron." Sometimes the two of them even preferred spending time with him instead of me because he spoiled them so much. But the happier I saw him with the children, the more one thought stayed in the back of my mind. Aaron was almost 40 years old now. I was already in my 30s. Maybe it was time for us to have a child together. One night, after putting Luna to bed, I went upstairs and found Aaron standing alone on the balcony. I walked up behind him and wrapped my arms around his waist. "Aaron." He turned around and smiled. "What is it?" I hesitated for a moment before saying, "How about we have a baby together?" Aaron looked at me in surprise. "Why are you bringing this up all of a sudden?" I lowered my eyes. I thought Barack and Luna. I paused before continuing. "I thought maybe you'd want a child who's biologically yours." Aaron gently held my shoulders. "Don't ever say that again. To me, Barack and Luna are my own children." He was quiet for a moment before speaking again. "I've never told you why my first wife asked for a divorce, have I?" I shook my head. Aaron looked out into the night. After we'd been married for more than a year without having children, we went to the hospital for a full checkup. That's when we found out I was infertile. I stared at him in shock. At first, she was heartbroken. She encouraged me, and we secretly tried every treatment we could without telling our parents. But after a long time, nothing worked. Eventually, she couldn't accept it anymore and asked for a divorce. My heart ached as I listened. For a man, being told he could never have children was a devastating blow to his pride. No wonder he had never spoken about it before. I stepped closer and wrapped my arms around him, giving him every bit of warmth I could. Aaron held me tightly and gently stroked my hair. Back then, I told myself I should never drag another woman into a life like mine. Then I met you. The first time I saw you, I was drawn to the way you refused to give up, no matter how hard life became. You worked from before sunrise until late at night, doing everything you could to give your children a better future. Even with all that hardship, you still smiled. I thought that if I stayed close to you, maybe some of your strength would rub off on me. But the more time I spent with you, the more I wanted to protect you, and the more I wanted to see you smile. I tightened my arms around him and smiled through my tears. Aaron smiled back. Now I've gained more than just a wife. I was blessed with 2 wonderful children, too. Giving birth doesn't make someone a parent. Raising and loving a child does. As long as I love Barack and Luna with all my heart, I believe they'll love me the same way. Standing together on that windy balcony, I suddenly remembered another night nearly 4 years earlier. I had stood alone on a balcony, ready to end my life. Back then, all I could see was darkness. There wasn't a single light ahead of me. Now I was standing on another balcony, but this time the man I loved was beside me. I rested my head against his broad chest and whispered, "Thank you. I love you so much." Above us, the night sky sparkled with countless stars. Wrapped safely in Aaron's arms, I smiled as I looked toward the future waiting for us. Life will always bring moments that make us want to give up. Sometimes those moments are so painful that we can't imagine tomorrow ever becoming brighter. But if we find the courage to keep moving forward, we'll never know the beautiful things still waiting for us. It doesn't matter if you've been through a failed marriage. It doesn't matter if you don't think you're beautiful. As long as you keep living with courage and kindness, Life has a way of putting everything where it belongs. Every one of us deserves to find happiness. After 13 years of sacrifice, McKenna finally found happiness once again, this time with Aaron. She had devoted the best years of her youth to her first love, only to be taken for granted by the man she trusted more than anyone else. In the end, her worth and dignity weren't restored by someone else. She reclaimed them herself. She stood back up, rebuilt her life with her own hands, and found a place where her hard work, her kindness, and her happiness were truly valued. It was there that Aaron saw what others had failed to see, a woman who was nothing short of extraordinary. None of us can know what the future holds or whether their happiness will last forever. But at this moment, they have truly found the person they were meant to walk through life with. And if the past were ever to repeat itself, one thing would be different. McKenna would never have to face it as the fragile woman she once was, because she has already rediscovered her own strength, her own purpose, and the value that has always belonged to her.